policy making discussion.
And if you have,
whatever.
well, they have machines. I mean, you know.
Every take my medicine, I always skip a little.
Okay, folks, well, the on-air light is on, telling us it's a go. So I want to welcome all of you this evening. And would you like to join us in the Pledge Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Diana, roll call, please.
Here.
Collins.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Pelham.
Here.
Kobzinski.
Here.
Okay, first we have a very, very special presentation this evening, and this is the Fire Department Citizen Award. And we have a wonderful citizen that many of us here on the dais know and have worked with for many years that's going to be receiving an award. And would our fire chief, John Brander, like to come forward?
Well, thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the mayor and the council for the opportunity to get up in front of you and the community to be able to present these awards to members of our community who've gone above and beyond and helped others out during a potentially tragic situation. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity that we have to do that as a department. Could I first have Mark and Andrea Yellen come up here? And I believe they're going to bring their family up here as well. So on December 9th of 2013, Mark and Andrea were driving on Grand Prairie Road, I think coming back, if I remember right, from taking some pictures, probably as part of his job, I would imagine. And on that night, as they were driving by, they noticed a house on fire on Grand Prairie Road, and they took immediate action to stop and see what they needed to do to render aid. They called 911. Andrea then, if memory serves me correctly, went to the front door and actually knocked on the door, found a guy inside, an individual inside who was gathering his possessions together and working his way outside, and you helped him, I believe, with his daughter and made sure that what they were doing was appropriate. And as a department tonight, we want to provide to both of you, Mark and Andrea, with a certificate of appreciation for your actions that you took that night, or that day, I should say. And this says certificate of appreciation presented to Mark and Andrea Yelm for selfless actions in providing life-saving assistance on December 9th, 2013, presented before the Albany City Council on the 9th day of April 2014. So with that, I would say congratulations and thank you very much. Okay, would Rich Roven please come forward? So on February 8th of 2014, Rich was walking his dog when he saw smoke coming from an attic of a house here in town, I believe on Elm Street. And he went to the door and found the front door of that house open and an individual inside who was unable to exit the house. I believe she'd had surgery or something like that, and she was not able to make her way outside the house. Rich then ended up going into the house, and it was a stove fire, a pot on the stove, if I remember right, that was on fire. And Rich tried to do the right thing. He tried to put a lid on the stove, if what I read was correct, and was unable to suppress the fire doing that. So he then picked the pot up and did the next best thing. He took the pot outside and put it in the snow outside to help suppress that fire. So if you had not taken immediate action in doing that, that fire would have definitely grown inside, and the individual that was inside would have suffered probably more dire consequences. So as a department tonight, we want to thank you for the actions that you took and then present you with this Civilian Life-Saving Award. And it's presented to Rich Roven for his selfless actions in providing life-saving assistance on February 8th, 2014. Congratulations and thank you very much. And our final award tonight is for James Myrick. James, if you'd come forward. So James, on December 4th of 2014, was traveling on Highway 20 when he witnessed a two-car accident, motor vehicle accident, that occurred in front of him. And so he immediately turned his flashers on his car to let other drivers know that there was a situation going on. He called 911, reported the accident, and then went to try and render aid to the individuals that were there. When he got there, he found one individual that was not hurt, but another individual that was significantly hurt, or maybe even severely hurt. Their window was hanging out. Their head was hanging outside the window, and they didn't have an adequate airway. James then ended up maintaining a patent airway, a good airway on the individual, and rendered first aid until our medics from the Albany Fire Department arrived, and then actually helped them after they even arrived with making sure that the individual was well taken care of. Mr. Myrick is an Army veteran who served in Afghanistan in 2007 and was a combat infantryman with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. During that time, he took a combat life-saving course, which I understand you later taught that course, and it's no doubt that those skills that you obtained from that class and from teaching that class helped you that night, and definitely in rendering aid to the individual led to the saving of that individual's life. So with that, tonight we want to present James Myrick with a Civilian Life-Saving Award from the Albany Fire Department for his selfless actions in providing life-saving assistance on December 3rd, 2013. So it is the Albany Fire Department's mission to prevent and protect from harm, and these actions that these four individuals took over the last few months reinforce the mission of our department and what we want to do and what we try and do to the community. And by them taking these actions, they led to minimizing the suffering for others and ultimately in saving another individual's life. So from the Albany Fire Department, we want to thank each one of you for what you did.
Yes, and on behalf of the City of Albany and Albany City Council too, we want to really thank you for being such a wonderful citizen and being out there helping people in need. The only thing that's not fair, though, is because Mark Yalen, the first recipient of the award, is a Democrat Herald photographer. So he's always taking pictures of us or others, and it was no fair this time, Mark, because you weren't having the Democrat Herald taking your picture this evening. I noticed you kind of must have planned that, but I did see Hasso, so at least there's going to be a photo, so thank you, Hasso, for getting his photo. Well, thank you so much, folks. That's just wonderful to see that in our community, and it's very special. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is a proclamation, and this is for Arbor Week. So this is Arbor Week, April 6th through 12th, 2014. Whereas in 1872, Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas Albany's urban trees grace our streets, parks, and open spaces, provide shade and habitat for wildlife, improve air and water quality, increase property values and economic vitality in business areas, and contribute to a sense of community pride and ownership. And whereas, through the cooperation of all residents of Albany, the beneficial effects of tree plantings in our community and in our surrounding forest lands can be passed on as a vital natural resource to succeeding generations. And whereas, the City of Albany has been named as Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation for 20 consecutive years in recognition for our stewardship of Albany's urban forest. Now, therefore, I, Sharon Canopa, Mayor of the City of Albany, Oregon, do hereby proclaim the week of April 6th through April 12th, 2014 as Arbor Week in Albany, and encourage all citizens to take time during the week to appreciate and enhance our community's urban forest and to participate in the week of activities celebrating our community's commitment to trees. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Albany to be affixed this 9th day of April 2014. And with that for Arbor Week, so we have a presentation next on our agenda, and that would be for Rick Barnett. So I think you're going to be the lead on that this evening?
Yeah.
From Parks and Rec. And we also have Mark Azevedo here, too, and our Tree Commission.
Yeah, we're just going to be real quick tonight. In honor of 20 years of Tree City USA, we have a presentation. You want to go ahead and do that?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. My name is Baird McLeod. I'm a forest management tech with the Oregon Department of Forestry. And as a representative of the National Arbor Day Foundation and Oregon Department of Forestry, it is my privilege in presenting the City of Albany with their Tree City USA Award for the 20th year.
Oh, wow, that's really nice. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's
And
very nice.
Mayor, we just wanted to highlight a few things with Arbor Week. This week, Monday and Tuesday, we did the Sign for Schools program again, which has provided $145,000 worth of lumber to the schools to work on projects and that sort of thing over the last 6 or 7 years we've been doing that. And we're just excited about that, excited about the opportunities that we have to. One of the things about urban forestry is what we do now really impacts our grandchildren. And if my kids ever get around to having grandchildren, my grandchildren will benefit from us making good decisions. And so that's what we try to do with that program. I want to thank Megan Schutz for her work with it, and also Wade Baris for his work out in the field working on that. So.
Wonderful.
Oh, one more thing I forgot. On the 26th, in conjunction with the Saturday market, we're giving 150 trees away for people to plant in their yards or wherever is appropriate, and it's 150 trees for 150 years of Albany. So,
Oh, wonderful.
thank you.
And will we be putting a news release out on that? You think,
Already
Mary?
done.
Oh, you already got that one? Okay, I missed it. So, anything from the Tree Commission? Mark, was there anything you'd like to say?
Chava Newhouse, who showed up
Oh, yeah.
from South Albany High School. She's the shop instructor there. She wants to say a few words.
Okay, yeah, Shelby, come forward. I also want to recognize that Democrat Herald did a wonderful article about sawing for schools, too. So we want to thank them. That was a very nice article. But you'll have to go to the microphone, sorry, around the, no, just walk around the other side, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and it should pick up your voice, okay? And then if you can, you'll probably need to spell your name
Okay.
And furnish your address.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and council members and the public who is here. I am Chava Newhouse, and I am the woodshop teacher at South Albany High School. Do you want me to spell my name now?
Probably the first name, I would imagine Diana would want to spell.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
C-H-A-V-A,
Okay,
and then Newhouse spelled the German
Yeah.
way.
thank you.
Okay. And I also just wanted to express my appreciation for two programs, both the Sawing for Schools and the Lumber to Legacy program, both of which have benefited my students, the kids of Albany, in just a number of different ways. I wanted to thank the city parks, Rick Barnett and Wade and Megan, who have already been thanked once, but they just did so much work to make this possible, and they've done so much work all year to make it possible for us to truck our wood over to OSU, to the kilns there, to dry it, bring it back to us. They've provided bus transportation to Portland so that our kids could attend a master woodworking studio up in Portland and be a part of making chairs with hand tools with the white oak that came from Albany, from the trees that came down for the Lowe's store, and those those chairs that our students have been a part of building are going to be auctioned off with the Lumber to Legacy auction in the fall. And those kids just had a tremendous opportunity working with master crafts people up in Portland doing this project. And the city parks provided the bus for us to be able to do that. And then I also wanted to thank the city for providing trees that had to be cut down to us for the Sawing for Schools program. North Albany Middle School had to take down a huge fir, and we benefited from that yesterday. Oregon Freeze Dry, a local business, donated the trees that they had taken down on their property this year, some beautiful big paper bark birch, and numerous people in the community have donated trees to us. This year was a great year for us to get trees because of all the snow and ice. So, can I turn around and face the audience? Does that work?
You can just have your back a little closer to the mic, so the mic, or if you come on this side, you might be able to.
All right. Can you hear me okay? All right. I have a pretty good, loud teaching voice, so, I may not even need the mic. Anyway, so also I just wanted to thank Justin McMines, who has recently taken over the Logs to Lumber business and has renamed it Wood Mines for Justin McMines, a great name. And he worked all day at both schools, Monday at West Albany and Tuesday at South Albany. At South Albany yesterday, we worked from 7:30 to about 6:30 at night milling lumber, and Justin is donating his time and the use of his equipment to mill lots and lots and lots of lumber. We milled about 2,500 board feet of lumber at our school alone, and that benefits Albany kids doing wood shop projects. He also, teaches kids to use the mill. It's a huge charge for kids to use a great big piece of equipment like that. He teaches them to use it. The kids who are really looking like they're paying attention and they're really sharp, they get a chance to actually run this mill. And it's a ton of fun. I've run the mill as well. The huge chunks of trees are put down or slapped down on this mill, and a horizontal bandsaw, a huge thick bandsaw blade, slices through this tree and makes gorgeous lumber. It looks like just this ugly sort of bark tree, and then you cut into it and you get this beautiful, beautiful lumber from our trees right here. So we should all just be proud that our trees are going to such good use and that kids are really getting a chance to make beautiful projects without having to pay a ton of money for those, for the wood for those great projects. So we really appreciate Justin's contribution of time, energy, and equipment to that project. Again, his business is Wood Mines, so support him when you can. Justin also last year hired one of our students from this opportunity, the Sawing for Schools. This is kind of like a great job interview. Justin can see how kids work, and he usually picks out somebody who is doing a great job and is a really serious worker, has worked all day long, cutting, milling, sweeping, stacking, all of this stuff, and gives a job to some of them. So it's a great employment pathway as well. And I also wanted to thank the whole Tree Commission, just their support of our schools and our programs in woodworking is really, really impressive. And I think especially I just wanted to thank Mark Azevedo, without whose tremendous vision for a program that would connect so many community elements in a grand sharing and benefiting of trees, wood products, craftsmanship, education, and workmanship. And work experience. Both the Sawing for Schools and the Lumber to Legacy programs have been that, and Mark is really responsible for their creation and for the coordination of people and logistics that makes that happen. And without the countless hours of his coordination, none of this could happen. Mark is tremendously self-effacing and humble and would say, well, all this works because of so many people's generosity, and that is true. But it is largely Mark that has given all of these contributors the opportunity to be really generous. So I want to thank everybody who's been involved in the community for these programs, Lumber to Legacy and Sawing for Schools.
Thank you so much, Albert. Yes, and you're very correct about Mark. He is humble when it comes to his service for the Tree Commission. So we thank you, Mark, for all you've done, so thank you. Okay, was that it on, Rick? That was it? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the second reading of the ordinance, which is the declaring a moratorium. And I wanted to make sure that folks knew we had taken public comment on this at 2 weeks ago at our council meeting. So tonight was just for taking action on this ordinance. But we also have, on the dais is also that second ordinance that was on the agenda last time. That would be over the regulations over medical marijuana dispensaries, and that would be with the zoning. So when you do see the council, whichever direction they do go on, that they vote on this item, if you can also kind of refrain from any sort of clapping. I know it's not going to please everybody, and so if we can just make sure that we're kind of being respectful in that manner. And that also, that even after there's the first vote, then you're going to want to stay for discussion to see what happens on the next ordinance too, on that. Okay? All right, so Mr. City Attorney, would you like to read this ordinance?
An ordinance of the City of Albany, Oregon, declaring a moratorium on medical marijuana facilities and declaring an emergency.
Okay, council, what would you like to do with this item?
Move to adopt the ordinance.
Okay. Motion to adopt, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Rich?
I'll try not to take too long. 30 years ago, I went into business. Sometime this week is the anniversary. And there is one immutable fact about business, and that is it changes all the time. What you thought you were going to do is not what you end up doing. I started at home in Corvallis. It was a repair business. It was then a repair business with moving around the country repairing, and then it was sales, and eventually it turned into a business here in Albany. There were times when I dealt directly with manufacturers, and one of them was Miller Electric. I bought a couple $3,000 worth of parts from them every month. And there came a time when they said, you know, we can do better, so we will have you buy from a local vendor. The local vendor being EC in Portland. This went on for years. Pretty soon, they got a little greedy and decided, you know, we can ship this stuff out there and make more money by cutting EC out. And at that point, I went back to them and said, hey, well, okay, fine. And they said, well, you haven't bought from us for 5 years. We don't want to sell to you now, so you have to buy it from somebody else. Was not what I wanted to do. It's what I ended up having to do. At that point, I looked around to see where the parts were made, and the parts that they were selling were made in China for inverter welding machines. Their machines. The parts go from China to Turin, Italy, and are made into modules, and then they go to Appleton, Wisconsin, where they're turned into what they call an American-made product. So I went to the people that they bought the machines from, and now I sell machines all over the nation. I'm not very big. But the bottom line is it's now a different business than it was before. Wasn't what I wanted to do then. That's how it worked out. This issue is one where people are being faced with having to do things they don't want to do. I know Canna Kitchen does not want to, or did not want to, be a dispensary. When we spoke, You know, it was thousands of dollars. They didn't want to spend it. Well, I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to. It was pointed out, however, they could sell to their services to other dispensaries. Only they didn't want to do that. Well, it's choices we make. At that point, I pointed out that they could move out into the county. They could move into Benton County. Well, they didn't want to do that. I understand. It's money. However, when they were speaking to the county this last week, they pointed out that they wanted to make sure the county did not enact the same ordinance, because that way, if the city did enact it, they could then just move out into the county. Well, evidently, they can move out into the county. You have to remember, when Mr. Bechtel came to us, he said, I want to cooperate with you. And on the surface, that sounds great. Right, let's keep the riffraff out, let's, you know. The problem is, everyone in the room knows the difference between how the federal government looks at it in the various ways they do, because they speak with about 8 different tongues, and how the state looks at it are different. If you talk to the DEA, it is a federal felony that they're just not going after right now. If you talk to the White House, it's, well, gee, that's just something that's no big deal. That can change any day. The guy that worked at Wachang who found that out. When he sold some stuff to a guy, they had an export license. I mean, the whole thing. As it turns out, one part of the government said, great. Another part of the government says, oh, you dirty, bad, nasty. And he went to jail. He had evidence. And when he got the evidence from the government, it was all redacted, every single word. So he didn't have any evidence anymore. The federal government, as I listen to the DA and to other law enforcement, I am told federal law supersedes state law, unless the federal government says, no, we're not going to do it. Now, the only people that can say that is, one, the Supreme Court, or two, legislature goes through and changes the law. They haven't done that I know of. So we're left with a dilemma. If we go along with creating dispensaries, from the federal perspective, we are then colluding with drug dealers. Now, it's not what we're talking about here, but that's not who's doing the talking. It's the federal government doing the talking. Now, while they're not right today doing anything about it, that can change any day they want to. Last thing I have here. I thought I had. Yeah, I do. I, Rich Kellum, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Oregon, and that I will do my best I will, to the best of my ability, faithfully perform the duties of Counselor of Ward 3 of the City of Albany during my continuance therein, so help me God. Federal law from the federal Constitution. It's a double bind, there's no question about it. I'm not going to tear this up. I made an oath, and I'm going to keep it. So I will vote for the moratorium.
Okay, all right. Any other discussion? Bessie?
I guess I have to ask the question. Jim, did I jump the gun? Do we need to read it a second time? And then? Okay, you did read it. Okay, I just wanted to make sure
It
that,
was read the first time 2 weeks ago, remember? And then it
Yeah.
was a no for the second reading.
oh, you're good, you're smooth, all right. But I too actually asked for the oath of office that we took. And I agree with Rich that, you know, you can't pick and choose what laws you obey or you don't, and that's supposed to be for all elected officials. And so my surveys, and we all talked to different people. I didn't go out and just pick people who I knew were going to say yes or no or whatever and stuff, but still 99% of the people have said no, we don't need the moratorium. I mean, we need the moratorium, we need to find more out about it. And also, when you have the departments that work with this, the police, the DA, the sheriffs, saying, I mean, they're the ones that actually deal with any problem that might come up. And so I just feel that this would be the best for Albany right now. And, it's kind of like, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what's going to happen in November. The climate is kind of changing, so, it's, we don't know. But as of this point, I just, like Rich says, I took an oath, and that's what I have to do.
Okay, all right. Floyd?
Just a short comment. I commented last week on the principal reasons why I will be supporting the ordinance, but in addition to the issue of avoidance between the state and federal government, I commented then that in 2010, we the state voted on a question of whether we should have dispensaries, and statewide that answer was no, at about a 54 to 46% ratio. Lynn County voted no on a 66 to 34%. Benton County voted no, 50.5 to 49.5. And then after that election failed, the legislature got involved, along with some lobbyists, and I think made a mess out of everything. I don't think they helped anything. I do believe that there is some level of appropriate use of medical marijuana. I think the system has been abused, and it's not being self-corrected. I, too, don't know what's going to happen in November, nor do I know what the legislature is going to do next session. I wouldn't know what we're going to do on May 2 next year if we do adopt a moratorium, because there's nobody projecting how that will be handled. Something will have to come forth. I don't think the city of Albany needs to be out there on the leading edge to do it. I think there are alternative methods and opportunities for those people who have legitimate medical marijuana needs to have those needs met. I would hope that everybody would join in trying to address the abuse that's going on in the system, whether it's the medical marijuana or whether we ultimately get recreational use. Assuming we do get recreational use, there will have to be some form of process for distribution of whatever gets approved. We have no idea what that may look like. So I, for one, don't want to formulate something that may be in conflict with what's coming down the road that would inhibit whatever the voters approve if it comes before November. I think with that, I'm going to just be in a position of supporting the moratorium.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Okay, Dick?
Yeah. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think I will anyway. I've been asking people what they think about the moratorium, and many people are not too up on what's going on. They don't know the story about William Randolph Hearst and how he and DuPont and the big law enforcement guys back in New York and so forth busted their bottoms to get marijuana declared illegal, in large part because it would have hurt DuPont's rayon and nylon business, and would have hurt William Randolph Hearst's lumber business, because industrial hemp is a very excellent fiber, and they didn't want competition from industrial hemp. That's the main reason marijuana is illegal. Still classified by the feds, #1 dangerous drug, but and like I've said before, I'm too old to be a devotee of marijuana. It passed me by somehow. That maybe it's because I was too involved in engineering in school rather than philosophy and religion and that kind of stuff. But one person I really respect his opinions, one of my physicians, and when you get to be my age, you go to the doctor more often than you do when you're younger. And I said, what do you think of this, having a moratorium on medical marijuana? Moratorium? That's a bunch of bullshit, he said, just like that. So, no applause. So, I am going to vote against the moratorium. Enough said.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, the motion is for the moratorium, so all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay, roll call, Diana?
Comer,
No.
Collins,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Kellum,
Yes.
Krasinski,
No.
Olson.
Okay, so that is a split vote, and that's the only time that I get to vote, which is very rare. And so with that, I am going to vote no on this moratorium. But the only reason, and one that I'm voting no, is the next ordinance, which is over the regulations. If they aren't approved, then I will ask for this motion to be reconsidered. So, and my stand is on it, as I stated, 2 weeks ago. My main concern is I do not want dispensaries in neighborhoods. And also to be able to have an additional level of inspection if our police department sees fit for something that, a dispensary could be questionable, to be able to have that authority. So that's my reason for voting no on this moratorium. So with that, council, on the dais, you have two separate ordinances. And I'm going to let our city attorney kind of explain the two different ones, but all of you have them? They're stapled together. One says prohibited within 300 feet of residential use, and the other one is prohibited within 300 feet of residential use, no industrial exception. So, Jim?
I'll also try to be brief. As you know, the recent Senate Bill 1531, in addition to specifically authorizing cities and counties to enact moratoriums, also said that cities and counties can enact reasonable regulation. And so the direction that I have been given is to prepare an ordinance which essentially has two additional elements of regulation. One is to say that dispensaries could not be cited in addition to the state law requirements within 300 feet, it was clarified, not just of a residential zone, but within 300 feet of an authorized residential use. So if you have a mixed use, like downtown, let's take Jordan Jewelers, for example, commercial use, the mixed use zone, residential use upstairs. So in that case, this would say that a dispensary cannot be located within 300 feet of a place where a residential use could lawfully occur. The other aspect is to establish a fee to essentially assist with helping to recover additional costs that law enforcement may incur as a result of this. There is a blank, and so if someone makes a motion, I would ask you to make a motion to also fill in the blank of what you want the fee to be. Both versions of the ordinance have that same blank. So if somebody is going to make a motion to adopt either of these variations, put in a dollar amount. The variations reflects the fact that there has been discussion while I was gone about whether or not you wanted this to apply the measure would be 300 feet from a commercial zone to a residential, or exclude an industrial zone to a residential. And so the one that says, at the little heading that says, no residential exception, would not carve out the special circumstance for
No industrial.
Industrials.
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, I misspoke. Yes, the one that says no industrial exception, I think it's obvious would apply then without the exemption that was discussed at your last meeting. So if you want, and let me also emphasize, you're not forced on a take it or leave it. If 4 votes of the council wants to give me direction to proceed with other regulation, to do something different, all you need to do is tell me, and I will bring that ordinance back with reflecting what 4 votes tell me to do, probably at your next work session. That would give you a chance to take a first reading at that work session and then adopt at the final meeting in April so that your regulation would be in effect by May 1. The only reason why that's important is I am anticipating that May 1 is when the state's going to start issuing their licenses, and it would be nice for people to know what the regulations are. Maybe they're going to issue them at other times. I don't know. You're not obligated to have regulations done by May 1.
Right. We're not obligated, but my main concern is having the regulations in case we have to reconsider the main moratorium. We'd have to do that before May 1st.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, Floyd?
Jim, maybe some clarification. In the state statute, it refers to delegation to local governments for implementation of reasonable restrictions. I did not see anything that defined what reasonable is, and therefore I asked myself the question, if we don't know what it is, are we assuming a risk if we adopt something without definition? And I'd kind of like to know what you might see a risk being if we adopted either.
Well, the legislature from time to time, in their effort to help us, doesn't help us as thoroughly as we would like. Obviously, it would have been very helpful if the legislature had given more guidance about what would be a reasonable or an unreasonable restriction. The state, I notice, of course, has set in its restrictions geographic distances from other dispensaries, from schools, and so the state law seems to assume that establishing certain distance restrictions is a reasonable regulation because they are doing it. So I think that there is a measure of security that if you want to simply adopt a distance restriction, that probably could be sustained. I think we would be on more difficult ground if we made a distinction between industrial and commercial zones as the measuring point, because presumably the purpose for the barrier, if you will, is to protect residential zones from whatever would go on at dispensaries. Now, you can argue about whether there's a basis for needing the protection. I'm not going to get into that one. But if presumably there is, in fact, a reason to protect residential zones from dispensaries, then that would seem to apply whether the dispensary itself was located in a commercial or an industrial zone equally well. You would protect the neighborhood next to an industrial use the same way you would protect the neighborhood next to a commercial use. So I think that one would be more difficult to defend if challenged.
Key word being if challenged.
Well, yes. I mean, frankly,
It'll get challenged.
many laws exist for many years without being challenged at the appellate courts. And so they're on the books until they are effectively challenged. And even if they are challenged, I mean, it's always a horse race to see what the outcome will be. But in answer to Councilor Collins' question, it is easier to defend one that does not make a distinction based on industrial or commercial.
Okay. So with that, council, is there a particular one of these ordinances that you would like to have read for the first time?
I move the...
Just tell me which one you want me to read.
The first one, the 300 feet residential use with no
no industrial exemption?
Exception.
I beg your pardon. An ordinance of the City of Albany imposing local restrictions on medical marijuana facilities and declaring an emergency.
Okay?
Clarification,
That's the
that's
first
the
reading.
no industrial exception, right? Is that what I
No,
heard you say?
the first one.
So just within the 300 feet of a residential use.
And the way the language is written, it would allow can of kitchen to continue.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Oh, I had that.
Then that would be the no industrial exception. That's the industrial, no, I beg your pardon, I'm mistaken.
Yeah,
Right.
the 300
So-
feet of residential use.
Item number 1, down at the bottom, says
Right.
restriction does not apply to property that is
That's right.
zoned industrial.
Yeah, I beg your pardon for the confusion. These were being put together yet this afternoon to make the distinctions because of last-minute change that I was supposed to change it not from residential zone, but residential use, so.
But to the point of the original proposal that I made, you wanted to add the dollar amount on the
Yes.
backside, $150 a year.
At 150. May I, for purposes of clarification, since I have muddied things, may I just take a moment and read the applicable section so everybody knows what we're talking about? In addition to such limitations and regulations as may be imposed by state law on medical marijuana facilities which dispense marijuana pursuant to ORS 475-314, no such facility nor any person operating as an employee or agent of such facility shall operate, locate, or dispense marijuana within 300 feet of any property lawfully zoned to allow residential use. This restriction does not apply to property that is zoned industrial, which is located within 300 feet of any property lawfully zoned to allow residential use.
Okay? So that's what was read the first time, the first reading. So is anyone wanting the ordinance to be read a second time?
Is there discussion now, or do we have to wait?
No, we need to, unless you're wanting to have the other ordinance read for the first time.
I'll make a motion, the ordinance be read a second time in title only.
Okay? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Second?
Okay, so that is held over because there was a no vote.
Seconded off.
So when we have a first reading, in order for us to act, would have to have a second reading, and but that has to be a unanimous vote to end up having that second reading. That's what happened on 2 weeks ago. So with that ordinance that was read, oh, yep, that would be fine. Go ahead and do a roll call.
Milburn,
Yes.
Collins,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Pelham,
No.
Kuzinski,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Middleton. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. Well, all it needs is one no, and that does it. So, unless the council's wanting to have the other ordinance read for first time, the first reading.
Well, procedurally and process-wise, given your opening statement, if we don't read the alternative ordinance, at least in first time tonight, and it may go to the second time, if upon the second reading, neither one gets the vote, we wouldn't have the opportunity to refer back to the moratorium question because the time would have passed in order to process the no industrial exception. I think procedurally, we would be better off to have both of them move forward to a second reading to know whether there is a 4-vote support or
Agree.
whether the mayor would have to ask for reconsideration of the moratorium.
I agree.
So we need to rescind the
No,
first vote?
you
that
can,
we
you
just
can
did?
send two ordinances forward at the same time. You just read them again for the second time next time and see if you get 4
Okay,
votes to
gotcha,
support
gotcha,
either
gotcha,
one of them.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay.
Question for Jim. I think that the other procedure is you do have an ordinance, and then it will be discussed, and it could be amended, and the amendment's voted on. In other words, you can change the ordinance before you vote on it.
You
We
could,
can't
but
do-
you couldn't accomplish what the mayor suggested, that if neither ordinance was adopted upon the second reading, there wouldn't be an opportunity before May 1st to reconsider the moratorium question.
Yeah.
Because
Let
that
me
decision
suggest
must be
that,
made.
You'd have to
Councilor
be
Coburn is correct. You could amend the other ordinance to match this second ordinance, But so that there is no confusion, there is no harm in taking a first reading on both. I would recommend that you take this matter up at your next work session, not that you wait until the next city council meeting, so that you have plenty of time to pursue whatever options you wish. So I think that's the more important decision. So with your permission, I'll read this second ordinance only to make it clear that you have all the options.
Right. Yeah, read the second one, and then that way, if it's, not going to end up getting a second reading, then at least they're both done, and we can
You can
tack on
proceed
both
as you
next
wish.
time.
It's an ordinance of the City of Albany, Oregon, imposing local restrictions on medical marijuana facilities and declaring an emergency. And if I may, again, for clarity, in relevant part, it says, in addition to such limitations and regulations as may be imposed by state law on medical marijuana facilities which dispense marijuana pursuant to ORS 475-314, no such facility nor any person operating as employee or agent of such facility shall operate, locate, or dispense marijuana within 300 feet of any property lawfully zoned to allow residential use. So it is the same as the other, except it does not have the other sentence, which says that the restriction does not apply to property that is zoned industrial. So now both options will be before the council at your next work session.
For a second reading.
For a second reading,
Yeah.
and if you choose, I would suggest to keep your options open, that you ought to not only read the ordinance, whichever or both that you like, a second time, but take a vote and see what the council is wanting to do, so that if then you wish to go back and reconsider, you have time to act. I just don't like to see you get to the last meeting. If you didn't have a quorum, for example, you would be foreclosed from acting.
Is everyone going to be here in 2 weeks? Any vacations?
What date is that? That's
April 21st.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So is everyone okay with that, or you can proceed?
We're going to be discussing both of these potential ordinances at the next work session, and then conceivably bringing one or both or none of them to the vote on council meeting on that Wednesday?
Well, we won't need to, because the first reading's already been read, so
Right.
both of them will come to the next council meeting as for the second reading, and then
So we're not
action.
going to be taking any kind of a vote at the work session then?
We wouldn't need to. I mean,
You have
unless
the choice, one way or the other.
I think we
want
have
to, then.
I think we have to decide which one of these is going to be read the second time at the council meeting, and discuss them the Monday before, so we know which one of these we're going to read at the council meeting.
You'd have to vote on that.
And the only difference
Yeah.
is punishing
You'll have to vote on
Cane
it.
Kitchen.
I think Jim's comment was appropriate, that we discuss it at the work session and have a decision there moving forward into the council meeting.
You have the legal flexibility and you have the time, if nothing comes up, to decide it either at the work session or at the council. Have as much debate at either meeting as you wish. I never like to get right up to a deadline. And since work sessions are formal legal council meetings, you have the prerogative of acting at that meeting if you wish. I just don't like to get too close to deadlines, but you have the time, assuming nothing unexpected occurs.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Council okay with that?
Yep.
I mean, you still have the option of proceeding forward with the, have the ordinance read a second time if you think there's enough votes to go forward, but if there's not, then we'll hold it over for the 2 weeks, so. Okay?
So that's, just for clarity's sake, assuming that there was not support for either one of these, there would still be time to reconsider the moratorium ordinance.
We'd have to have a question brought back up to reconsider that motion, the
Right.
moratorium. And then there would be a motion on that, then there'd have to be also another motion for the moratorium. It'd be two separate
Does that
ones.
second motion then take a first and second reading?
No. You would be back to reacting.
Acting on our previous second
Right, that has
reading.
already had second reading.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, I hope everyone was able to understand that. I know it can seem kind of confusing, and I'm sorry for that, but we do have our legal process that we have to follow according to our charter. So, So we will be taking this item up, it looks like maybe at our next work session, which is the 19th, is that, Marilyn? What date is that?
It's the 21st.
21st would be the work session, or it could be final action would be on the 23rd. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, all right, council, let me get my paperwork. Okay, next is business from the public, and is there anyone that would like to bring an item forward this evening? So, yeah, Greg?
I'll try and fix this without knocking it out. Good evening, my name is Greg Bexell. I live at 978 Ferry Street Southwest. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Albany Alternative Health Solutions, dispensary here in Albany. I just want to thank you guys for making prudent decisions this evening. I know that you will discuss this at length and come to reasonable regulations, and kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Delapour said, in this process, we've talked to just countless attorneys about this and the whole reasonable thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, the reasonable restriction is kind of a legalese for pretty much anything that doesn't get challenged, right? I mean, that's as long as it's not absurd. Our lawyers have told us that reasonable could pretty much be anything as long as it doesn't get challenged and overturned in a court. And I don't, from the public, I don't know if I'm able to ask him directly that, but that's my understanding from our discussions with our attorneys. So to make a long story longer, I know you guys will come to reasonable restrictions and make the right decisions, because remember, this is not about a dog. This is people's lives we're talking about. Mr. Kellum would have people driving to other communities in the hope that those communities don't ban medical marijuana. Mr. Collins is correct. There are two schools there's two sides, if you will, to the OMP community, and unfortunately there are some folks that do take advantage of the system. Albany doesn't have those, and regulations to prevent them from coveting, we support. Patient support, the community supports. Just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, nobody supports. So those of you that made the right decisions this evening, people are listening, and they know. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you, Greg. Okay, anyone else from business from the public? Okay, all right, okay, thank you, folks. Okay, council, this is carryover from our meeting, I think it was a couple meetings ago. And so on tonight's agenda is a continued discussion regarding legislative amendments to the Albany Development Code recommended by the Business Ready Task Force to remove obstacles to development, address issues with home businesses, and plan developments as described in Planning File DC 0313. Let's see, are there questions of staff and discussion regarding the proposed amendments? Or Ann, did you have kind of some words you wanted to state on this update? Anything? Okay. Was there questions?
Just a comment. I contacted Jen Steele from the Chamber because she was also on the committee that looked at this. I have some issues with some of the changes, but I wanted the input from her, and assuming she had heard from business owners and so forth. She indicated two things. She didn't really have a problem with these changes, but more interesting is she said that it was a good first step and thought there was a lot more work to do. So for what it's worth, I guess I'd have to agree. It's probably a good first step, but there's more opportunities and more things we can do, I think, along the lines of making the city, more business friendly and business ready and that type of thing. So I think it was a good effort, Mayor. I know a lot of time and effort was put into it, and a lot of people volunteered their time, so it's a good process, and I would be in favor of the ordinance.
Yeah, well, thank you, Bill, for that. And yeah, there was many kind of conversations that came forward that, we thought, well, no, we'd really like to kind of get more in depth on certain code issues, but it would have taken so much more staff time of opening up, say, the sign code, the whole sign code. So we didn't have the staff time to do such a thorough review and changes, and then that kind of brings it into the realm of really doing an overall development code periodic review, where you need to be able to bring more public into the process and go through a more at-length process. So we sort of kind of chipped away at the pressing issues that staff was seeing that really needed to be addressed, and that's kind of what we took on to tackle on that. So, Wes?
Yeah, and just a reminder that we've been operating with a very short staff in the Community Development Department for a significant period of time. We're in the process of trying to help with that situation right now in hiring a planning manager, but I think planning staff would tell you that right now they're just trying to keep their heads above water. We've seen increased development activity in the city, so most of our effort is going into current everyday planning. And to try and take on this kind of a system that requires a lot of staff work, a lot of communication, et cetera, is not easy to do. The summary statement behind all of that, I guess, is that in the past it was our goal to try and review the land development code at least once a year, and it may be a while before we're back in that position again, but I think there's an acknowledgement that it's an ongoing issue and one that we need to try and make a priority.
All right, any other questions? Rich?
I see options here, 1, 2, and 3. I guess they're kind of there. I am of the opinion we probably ought to pick number 2, but I don't have issues with sign code things. I don't have issues with expiration of land use approvals. I mean, it's...
What page are you on?
On the green. And, this isn't the time for statements, so I guess the question is, do we have to do all or one, or can we delete things off of it?
Couldn't we also adopt the ordinance that was in the packet? Yes. These are just options that we could consider, but...
Well, if you adopt the ordinance that's in the packet, right. I'd vote against it. I mean, it's discriminatory against small business in neighborhoods. I mean, it says if you have a little business, you are held to 60 decibels, which is basically conversation at your property line, and your next door neighbor can have 110 with a leaf blower. I mean, that's not a reasonable restriction. I mean, it just goes back to if you want to have restrictions on noise, and I think noise restrictions are a good thing, don't get me wrong. It should apply to whomsoever is making the noise, not just somebody if you happen to be earning your living.
I think one difference is people don't blow leaves every day of the week.
Well, people don't make that kind of noise every day either. If you simply say you can't make the noise,
I tend to agree with you that is.
I mean, I would take out the noise. Basically, if you walk down the street and you can't tell somebody is doing something, I have a hard time saying they can't do it. I mean, but.
So, staff, I need, first of all, clarification. We've already done our first reading and second reading, correct? This was just the deliberations?
No, you tabled it.
First reading of the ordinance.
I thought we did.
It's listed on here. I mean, I thought you did, but now it's listed here that it's first reading. I remember you tabled the discussion before you had.
Right, but I think we were in discussion of the ordinance. I think we read it and had the second, and then it ended up being tabled. Are the minutes, I think are the minutes in this agenda packet?
Well, maybe while you're digging through that, I want to respond to Rich, because we've had this discussion before. So where I'm coming from is that I have the right, living in my house, to have a quiet neighborhood, and if there's dogs barking, there are ordinances for that. If there's, a loud stereo, there's ordinance for that. We talked about the fellow that makes let's say, boat trailers in his garage, and he makes them for a living. So, on one side, I have a guy that he's going to make one boat trailer for his boat, and he has the skills to cut and weld and do that stuff. That's perfectly legal. There is this noise issue you're talking about, but it's going to be for a limited time, as opposed to the guy that has the in-home business, and he's making trailers, 5 days a week, all year long. That's where I draw the distinction. Now, you have a valid point on the noise in that, is there a difference, 60 decibels, if it's just a random number, is it any different if it's a dog barking or a loud stereo or Dick's restoring a car or Joe Smith is welding a trailer? My issue is you're disturbing my peace, and I'm in a residential area, and I'd like to have it quiet. So
I agree with you.
I guess the point is the 60 decibels, and
Well, the 60 decibels, that's conversation. You're saying you walk up to your property line and you speak across your property line, the average person is about 60 decibels. A weed, a blower is like 100 and something.
Right.
Well, if you're going to say, you can't use, hey, the UPS guy goes by, hey, don't, you just violated the rules.
Right.
Well, I mean,
but like Dick was
the
saying,
issue is what level it is, and it's different for different people. And, if it were different if we used a different standard rather than business, we wouldn't ever do it.
I guess I can get back to what Jim was talking about with reasonable, defined reasonable.
Yeah.
I can expect this Saturday, there's going to be a lot of people mowing their lawns. Sunny weekend, lawns need mowed. I expect that. I'm surrounded by dogs. Somebody was talking during our big blue debate a couple years ago. Dogs bark. Yeah, I get that. Lawnmowers, leaf blowers, it's a short time to blow the leaves over and so on. What I don't expect is the guy next door building boat trailers all year long. I don't think that would be reasonable.
If he's not making the noise, what's the problem?
Well, but the issue is the noise. That's what we're talking about, 60 decibels, 80 decibels, whatever we can figure out on. My point is, the potential with the home business is the ongoing noise. It's not the half hour to mow the lawn. It's not the 15 minutes of the dog barking. It's that 5 days a week, this guy is, drilling, grinding, welding, hammering, and it never stops. And it's like, this is next to my house.
Well, I think
Not be legal.
Well, I think Mark wants to say something. He wasn't quick enough, so I'm going to make a comment because the mayor recognized me. I think it's important to realize that we're not really talking here so much directly about noise standards. What we're trying to determine is what are the categories or the characteristics of businesses that might be okay in a residential zone. Because the notion is that you break the city up into zones, and that in residential zones, you're going to have people next to you that are living their lives the same way you are. And that in commercial zones or industrial zones, you're going to have people generally doing industrial things. Because we're trying to be friendly to people in small business situations and startups, we are not saying absolutely no industry in a residential zone. What we're trying to do, though, is come up in advance with a list of the characteristics we would look at and trying to generally figure out what kinds of industries might have a small enough impact that they wouldn't be too offensive to neighborhoods generally. That's the idea. And noise is simply one of the standards you've looked at. Historically, you've looked at, did it have extra parking? Did it have big signs? Did it have other things that would generally be incompatible with a quiet neighborhood? And so this is not intended to be the place we would adopt general noise restrictions. It's really just intended to try to create a list of the kinds of characteristics that you'd want to have to determine whether a business can be next to your house.
In kind of,
Gotta
kind
be
of
more
an
persistent.
kind of an example of it is, I've had to deal, I've been in my house 37 years, and I've had to deal with, neighbors coming and going, and I had a neighbor one time that was, using a nail gun. And you wouldn't think it'd be that loud, but it's the constant hearing a nail gun going all the time can really get on your nerves. And it's hard for you, to be able to have kind of opinion over it unless you've experienced it yourself. And it is very, it can be disrupting. And we live in a neighborhood that you want to be able to have it be more peaceful and quiet. And if somebody's having their roof replaced, you know how noisy that can be when you have a neighbor's roof replaced, but that's usually a 3 or 4 day process. It's not that same noise going all year round on that, so, Mark, sorry.
So I think Jim captured the context pretty well in that really what what you see as restrictions are actually, we're giving people an allowance to run a business in a residential zone. However, if you're going to do that, here's some standards you have to meet. Now, I will say in the existing development code language, we already address noise. We say there cannot be any offensive noise. What we have tried to do with this code, in addition to loosening some of the existing language, is also develop some measurable standards so that someone's complaint can actually be addressed and say, we understand maybe you don't like your neighbor, and so then you're going to complain about their business. Well, they're meeting these standards, so they get to continue to do that. So we're looking for measurable standards, and I think taken as a whole, this language does actually allow, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, allow more use in residential areas than our current code language does.
No, it does not. 60 decibels, what's reasonable? I was just well over 60 decibels right there.
Well, it's not reasonable.
Oh, well, then I should leave. The bottom line is, when you say whatever is reasonable, if it's going to be 60 decibels, that means people can't do anything except walk up to the edge of their property and talk, which means you pretty much can't do anything. You can't drive your car by.
Well, no,
not
because
really. It's consistent.
That's
It's
more than
consistent.
60 decibels.
But another example I'll give, is I'm surrounded by industry too, on the, west and south end of me. And years back, Ormet had replaced this scrubber, whatever they called. And it was a very high-pitched sound that was coming out of this scrubber. And yet I'm quite a distance from it. I couldn't sleep at night hearing this high-pitched sound. So back then, our police department had the decibel machine and went out and measured the decibels to it, which was 55. So it wasn't as real loud, but it's that constant high-pitched sound from that you're hearing from a neighborhood that never had to hear that before. Well, Ormet was wonderful, and all they had to do is put like a muffler thing on it, and then it toned it down. But it also happened with Snow Temp. And Snow Temp had one of their refrigerations that was a bearing going out of it. And it's like, I'm hearing this loud pitched sound, and I remember the police department went out and took a decibel reading, which it didn't exceed it, but Snow Temp was pleased that I brought it to their attention because they had bearings going out and it needed to be replaced, and that fixed it. But Rich, it's that constant sound when you're in a neighborhood and you hear those sounds. Sometimes the 60 decibels you might think isn't a lot, but when you're hearing it as a certain tone of it, if it's high pitch, it can get very irritating. So I've been there, I've seen that. But
do what you will, but what you're telling people is we are not business friendly if you're a little guy.
No, because
that's exactly what we're telling them. We're going to restrict you more than we did before. This is not less, this is more.
No, it isn't. And also, but we're also looking out for, we have to have a balance. We're looking out for neighborhoods.
Yeah, and if it's mariachi music, or if it's, acid rock from the 19 whatever, if you have a garage band, it's all the same kind of thing. It's how much of it do you get? I'm saying if what you want to do is lower noise, great, lower noise. But do it to everybody, not just one group.
Yeah. Ann?
I just want to make a few clarifications about the standards for noise. Well, currently, as Mark said, we have offensive noise, which is very hard for us to measure. But the proposed language is for noise at or beyond the property line, not inside the building, but at the property line, sustained for more than 10 minutes. So we're not talking about a little bit of noise here and there. We're talking about sustained noise. And this recommendation actually came from a small business owner that did testify in support of the package of the proposed amendments at your last meeting. And then the second point I wanted to make was that there is an allowance to exceed this measurable standard through the conditional use process. There may be situations where it might be reasonable to make noise more often, given the nature of the business or the location of the business, and that's something that could be evaluated through the conditional use process.
And just to add to what Ann is saying, in response to Councilor Kellum's thing about the message that we're sending to businesses. Right now, the message that we're sending to small businesses is that anytime we judge you to be making offensive noise as a home occupation, and it could be lower than 50 decibels, you could be run out of town. You'd be closed down, cited for violating the code. What this standard does is makes a more precise standard. It is not more restrictive. It is less restrictive than what we currently have. I mean, I at least in any way I can interpret it, it clearly gives business, it creates more opportunities for small businesses to operate out of their garages, for example, than we have today. That was the intent of it, and I believe it'll be the practical effect of it.
Yeah. Floyd?
Question, with the existing language we have, the offensive language, how many issues have we had in the last 2 years?
It's pretty rare. We do occasionally get a complaint.
Well, I had that research last month. I'll look and see.
Thank you, okay.
I seem to recall it was around 20. Yeah.
Well, we get complaints around 20 a year on home businesses. How many are about noise? Noise is one we do get complaints about occasionally, but I can't tell you the percentage of the complaints on that right now. So,
I guess I'm kind of where Bill is. When you look at a residential district, there are expected variations. On the other hand, when you're looking at developing a small business and you start in your garage and take the HP guys that started in the garage. They started, pretty soon they got big enough. They didn't try to take over the neighborhood. They moved out to commercial zones or industrial zones as their business grew. I think having a business in a residential neighborhood is a privilege, not necessarily a right. And with that privilege comes the expectation that there are some standards. And once you implement those standards, if the business continues to grow, I think they'll move out and find sites that accommodate their continued business. I see it as relaxation of the existing language, and it makes it easier for people to make that transition. And so I think adopting the original recommendations makes some sense. If we find that that's not correct, we can always come back and amend it again. Because one thing we've always talked about is anytime you adopt any regulation, you're going to find over time where the problems are. We can't get everything 100% correct straight out of the box.
Exactly. Well said. Okay, so Ann, I need clarification here. So what we have in our packet here, well, of the ordinance and what you had down for what was in on our white pages here, what is the difference that you have between these two, the option 1 and the option 2 on the green paper, and the option 3? Or no, option 3 is deny on 1 and 2.
well, I thought if you wanted to work on the home business amendments further or bring back language on that you could consider adopting an amended ordinance without that exhibit. But if that's not necessary, then you would look at option 1. You can use option 1 and still further amend Exhibit A, which includes the home business standards, if you'd like us to modify the language around noise, for example, and then you would.
So, but in other words, as adopting the ordinance that's in the packet, then the other motion is just adopting the original ordinance also.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I need is option 1 or option 2 is not what's in the white page, right?
The main thing is adopting the ordinance in your packet with the proposed revisions that I went over in the staff report last month and that I provided replacement pages for you. That
Okay.
doesn't change anything with the home business standards, but it's issues that came up between the planning commission meeting and your meeting that staff supported, recommended changing those. So with the proposals as provided by staff at the last meeting, and they're in your packet, those were the pages we did include.
Wes?
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
if your plan were to adopt the Business Ready Task Force recommendations as have been modified in the ways that Ann has described by the Planning Commission, you would simply move to adopt the ordinance as it was in your packet.
Right.
The green sheet is irrelevant,
Okay,
and it has been read twice in title only.
right, okay.
I move adoption of the ordinance on page 5.
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? Not all those.
That's page 9. Page 5 is the medical marijuana.
Oh,
Sorry. We were on page 9.
Nice
I
try.
tried to pass it again.
Nice try.
oh, that's
Honest
been
mistake.
that would have been a sneaky one. It is his birthday, so we'll
Honest
forgive
mistake.
him
You know,
today.
you were talking about having language brought over from last year's budget and how that messed up the works.
Yes, I understand. Well, you also have to understand that I crossed another decade line tonight, so my memory just got a whole lot worse.
I did not sing happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to
Thank you
Floyd,
for not
so.
singing.
Okay, so we got a
Ordinance
motion.
on page 9.
Okay, ordinance on page 9, and there was a second, and any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried, 5-1. Okay, let's see. Okay, a legislative decision of the City Council may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals by filing a notice of intent to appeal not later than 21 days after the decision becomes final. Within 5 working days following adoption of an amendment or land use regulation, the director shall forward to the Department of Land Conservation and Development a copy of the adopted text and findings and notify the department of any substantial changes which may have occurred in the proposal since any previous notification to the department. That is one long sentence. So, okay, all right, we are done with that item. And just a sec. Okay, and next is adoption of the consent calendar. Would you like any items pulled off? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to pull item 1A.
1A, okay,
And 2, please.
and 2,
And 4?
and 4. Okay, and so,
I'll make a motion, we adopt items number 3 and 5 on the consent calendar.
And 1B.
And 1B, thank you.
and 1B, got it.
1B, 3, and 5.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, so, Ray, were you 1A?
Item 1A, page 27 of our packet. Just a question for Kate. Down there in the second to last paragraph that talked about the Redemption Center, et cetera, and you said that you were going to initiate or start some conversation with that person. What's the status of that?
Hello, good evening. So on the Redemption Center, I have reached out to Stephanie Marcus, who was the person, she and I, we wrote a letter to her, and John also engaged in that, and then I called with follow-up to talk with her, and then we've since gone around and identified a number of properties that would be suitable for her use. There were a couple suggestions that were made that aren't going to be a good fit. For example, the Hollywood Video location, which is now bulldozed to the ground. It had
That would have been a good
significant,
location.
it had significant structural issues with it, but there's a handful that could be possibilities for her. So
So she's still looking?
she's still looking, and we're keeping that dialogue open, and there's a continued back and forth to try and help her find a suitable
That
location.
was my only item on 1A. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Was the building on the southwest corner of Queen and Gary?
Gary, the old grocery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah,
on the list?
It is on the list. It's a little larger than what they had been looking for, but it is for sale, which is something they've wanted.
Yeah.
So that was on the list. The old Safeway site, the old Mark Thomas Motors location on Pacific, the Western Tool Supply is one. I'm pointing at the people who threw out different ideas here.
About the bowling alley.
Bowling alley is a possibility. It's pretty large and fairly expensive. I just spoke with a realtor on that today. They've just lowered the price on that building. But yeah, there's a
location.
handful, and of course, because that's how I am, I have a spreadsheet for her. So I've been keeping her updated and email her links of interesting prospects. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. That was item 1B. Why don't we take all of them up at the same time as a motion? So who was number 2, was it?
It was me. I'd just like to have John speak to the application for up to 180 new jobs in the community.
Uh-huh.
You know, we often pass things like this, and I think that they are such significance that they deserve their own discussion.
Yep, agreed.
Thanks, Floyd.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Again.
So, Wes and Kate and others know that we've been working with some local companies for quite a while. And recently, we've had 4 of these enterprise zone applications come through after probably a couple of years of work. And one of these is Selmet, which is not in Albany, but Wes and I have been talking to them about coming here. But they're in Lynn County, and lots of Albany residents work at Selmet. And this is quite a large expansion, $25 million. They actually spent $5 million last year on a new chemical milling process, and in the process of buying more land nearby. And so the metals casting and aerospace industry looks pretty bright, and the 180 is a minimum new jobs, and these are good jobs. These are family wage jobs. 150% of Lynn County's wages, average annual wage plus benefits, so these jobs will have to pay over $54,000 a year, and many of them will. So this is very good for the area. This is good news, and this has been sort of dragging on for a long time.
I think this is really an example of, you can go a couple of years working on stuff and you never see any fruit.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the fruit comes to the table. And
Yeah.
we have such a tendency to look over it. But it's the secondary effect. We don't get the direct effect of the taxation from the expansion, but the secondary effect of having 180 new jobs created in the community, whether they're inside the urban growth boundary or outside, Albany will benefit. And we've been working very hard, and it's one of our strategic goals, is to seek new employment characteristics in this community. And I think this is a great example of people working hard over several years and bringing it, so we're working with the private sector.
And I think that a focus, too, on working with the, additional or existing industries has really been a big benefit for all of them that, have been looking at expanding, and because that's a lot faster bringing those jobs online.
Much better. There's 15,000 economic development organizations trying to recruit people, so if you have them in your backyard, they're a lot easier to keep.
Oh, yeah,
And,
yeah.
it
big
goes on to
benefit.
speak to the issue that the Chamber and others have been involved with Lynn Benton, is trying to make sure that we have people who are educationally prepared to move into these jobs locally, so we're not seeing an exodus of people leaving the community because they can't find a job because the jobs they want they're not qualified for. So it's a real cascade of different issues, but it does come to the table once in a while, and I think it's an opportunity for some celebration that this is a payoff to a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it is, yeah. What's the timing on it? When are they looking at having it completed, their expansion?
I think it's a 5-year project, but, I mean, they're starting right now.
So the jobs...
And they've started last year. I'd say they put $5 million into another facility. At the time, they weren't in the enterprise zone, so...
Oh, so the
now they
180
are.
is actually transition over time within that
Yeah,
5 years
yeah.
on that, yeah. So, well, and then, working with, say, a new industry, trying to get them to come to Albany can take at least 5 years. We know how that goes, so, great. All right.
They also just expanded in Millersburg.
Yeah. yeah, make sure everybody has that down.
Right, thank
Okay,
you,
any
John.
questions
Thank
of
you.
John?
I move adoption of item 2.
Okay, all right.
Did you,
Motion's been
I
made.
think the mayor said we can take all three at
We
once.
can take
sorry.
all three at the same time,
Thank you,
yeah.
Lord. So-
Okay, thank you so much, John. And then, what was the other?
Item
Number
4, so maybe Mark, what's unique about this particular corner that it needs more room for a pedestrian ramp?
It's generally, when a development comes in, we get most of the right-of-way dedicated through the land use process and with their subdivision. In this case, I don't know the details, but what I believe happened was, based on just the geometry of this intersection, we needed a little more room to get a curb ramp and sidewalk that meets ADA requirements, and that had to go onto that private property. And so in order to do that, they're having to dedicate this additional little bit of easement to facilitate that ADA curb ramp at that intersection.
So do you think this is unique to this corner, or do you see this as a pattern throughout the whole city?
I think it's unique to this corner in this subdivision. As I said, usually we get adequate right-of-way for all the improvements, including the sidewalk to meet ADA, during the subdivision process. They dedicate that on the plat.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll make a motion that we adopt items 1A, 2, and 4 of the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, consent calendar is done, and
I'm going to break in for that.
Oh.
I want everybody to sign that card.
I'll bring it up after business from the council. I brought the card.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought you might pass it along.
It's already been
Already
passed
been
down.
here.
Has it been
Yeah,
down there?
yep, it's been
Oh, I
down there. So I'll make sure everyone signs it, yeah. Okay, thank you. And then next is modifying the Water Avenue streetscape plan. So we already had this report come to us at the work session. And Mark, did you have some more?
Just
words
a
on it?
reminder that your adoption of this modification to the Water Avenue streetscape is required prior to us being able to grant them a change to their land use, because their land use has to meet any sort of master plans. So, again, this came forward from the developer, and staff does not have any issues with the request, and we support the request for the change.
Move for adoption of the resolution modifying Water Avenue streetscape plan.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. Next, business from the council. So Bessie, anything this evening?
Nothing tonight.
Nothing, Bill?
No, thanks.
Okay, Dick?
Well, I brought to sing happy birthday to
No, that's okay. I had to wear the sombrero on Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
That was enough, thank you.
I know.
So we've got a singer there at the end of the day.
That's okay.
I promised him I wouldn't. I threatened him, though.
I think he should turn 10 shades of red like what you guys did to me. I know.
Hey, I was the instigator. Don't go blaming them. I'll take it.
I'm sorry I didn't bring you flowers, Floyd.
I know, that's true.
Sharon got hers.
Hey, and those flowers lasted a long time. Good job, thank you.
There's something wrong with a guy singing happy birthday to another guy.
I love you, man.
First it's the marijuana, and now this?
Keep moving, please.
Okay. Let's see, Dick, you didn't have anything else?
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to thank the street department for cleaning out the grate at the end of the 8th Street Canal where I live, so thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Rich?
I've said enough.
Okay, Ray? Nope. Lloyd? Nope, okay. And no, the only thing I did have was a card for Ralph Wyatt for the passing of his wife. So it looks like everybody did sign it.
Yeah, I
If
thought
anybody
it was
didn't,
stuck there.
let me know if you didn't sign it.
No.
And we'll get that mailed off. So, yeah, that's very sad. So, yeah, our hearts go out to him. But,
Okay, had she been sick for a while, or sudden?
I have no idea. She's been sick or?
She's been sick a long time.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Betsy?
I did have one question. I noticed that we had another person resign from the public Safety Facilities Committee, and I just wondered,
I can explain it. It's Dr. Haggerty.
Yes.
And he resigned because he had taken on some additional
Right.
responsibilities with his work. And it had nothing to do with any disagreement or problems. And he just,
do they replace these people, or
the
they just?
decision was made not to do that.
I just wondered.
It's a
Okay.
large enough group. Yeah, and I have a couple of items. And since Jim has already asserted himself,
Yeah.
we'll start with Jim.
Okay, yeah, that'd be it. Jim?
Thank you. You have on your dais a note from Marilyn Smith, subject property motion. This is a motion that I would like you to adopt. We have some performance issues that we're trying to work through with regard to the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant and Talking Water Gardens. We're trying to explore, carefully looking at all of the issues, and since these are large infrastructure projects where a lot of work was done many years in the past because they take many years to get built, we don't want to have a situation where we ever get into statute of limitations issues that push us into acting earlier than we want to. So this motion would authorize the city manager under his authority in the charter as person responsible for city property to engage counsel as necessary, engage technical experts as necessary to give staff information and execute agreements to suspend statute of limitations as he deems appropriate. Councilor Killam spoke to me in advance about a concern that this not be an open-ended grant. We certainly don't intend it that way, and I would submit that we would probably, with Marilyn serving as the reminder, agree to report back to you in not more than 6 months about what we're finding out and what we're doing. So if that's satisfactory, I would like you to adopt the motion. If you want me to read it, I will, but I don't think I need to.
Okay.
Second.
Did you want it read?
Do we need to read it, or just, okay.
You don't think we need to read it? Okay, motion's been made, and there's a second. Discussion.
Just for clarification, for the record, this is simply a motion which authorizes the manager to take the steps I've said, that he can engage counsel, he can engage experts, he can sign agreements so that we don't ever get caught up in statute of limitations issues if advised by counsel.
Okay.
You know, the standard caveat applies here that the city manager is not looking for new powers and responsibilities, and in fact, quite the opposite. Probably, it was out of an abundance of caution that we even brought this back.
Yeah, Wes and I had a healthy disagreement about whether we needed to do it, but we decided that we might as well. Wes did.
He lets me win every once in a while.
That's a good idea, you know.
Okay.
Let the boss win.
Motion's been made in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. All right, and Wes, do you have anything else?
I do. Just one brief report. This actually relates to the Public Facilities Review Committee. At their meeting last night, they did proceed with some direction that I'd reported at the March 12th meeting about wanting the council to move forward with engaging an architect to come up with what they described as renderings of the proposed new fire station. And the council at that March 12th meeting had indicated that you supported that step. With that direction, and now with that recommendation coming officially from the Review Commission, it would be my plan to get our staff started on the RFP process for engaging an architect. And of course, obviously, no award or anything would happen until the council has the opportunity to review it, but it does take some time to put one of those together.
Just reading the newspaper article, because obviously we're not attending those meetings, I guess my question is, how does the architect function if they're still discussing what the size is and/or what basis for the design?
I think the headline was a little misleading in the paper, and not, I'm sure not intentionally so, but there was not complete agreement on the wording of the size. I think the sense of the committee was that they generally thought that the ZCS recommendations were good, that the range of size probably fell somewhere between 25 and 29,000 square feet, but it actually could be less or it could be more depending on what the architect decides. I think the point is that they had enough agreement to move forward with getting the renderings and at least starting the process to get somebody who could come up with those renderings.
Do you have any idea of an approximate value or cost for these renderings, as you call them?
No, I really don't. I mean, there'd been discussion in an earlier session, they talked as much as a couple $100,000, but I think that's probably high if you're just talking basically renderings.
Well, and I have some concerns. So we were chastised for saying, hey, give us 20 million and we'll build these two facilities. But one of the ideas that has been discussed is the idea of design build. And it does keep your construction costs down, particularly from the architectural design and the engineering standpoint. And I think that we're shooting ourselves in the foot because while you could do these renderings, as you call them, and still have design build, I think you've wasted too much money on the renderings. And I don't know if there's a limit, a fixed amount that we can spend without going out to bid and talk to a local, spend the money in Albany and talk to a local architect and say, give us some renderings.
I'm sure we can come up with some proposal along that line, and bear in mind that whatever we do, it's coming back to you for the decision. I mean, I'm not proposing that if you make a decision to make an expenditure at this point, we're just going to put out an RFP. You then will have the opportunity to review, whether it's too expensive or whether it fits, whether it's a reasonable budget. I'm not anticipating that it will be in the $200,000 range, frankly.
And if I may, just on design build and the process, usually the city would engage an architect to start some sort of design before you'd go out for your design build proposal. And I think the rule of thumb is you'd get to about a 30% design. So I think these renderings probably fall in with somewhere in that 30% design window that you do anyway before you engaged a design build contractor.
Well, the other thing I mentioned, I don't know that we have to reinvent the wheel, but Good Samaritan went through this with the hospice center out on, is it Waverly or Columbus? It changes there.
We do RFPs fairly routinely.
I'm not speaking the RFP. What I'm speaking of is, what procedure did you use to get to design build? Because they went design build, and I believe they had 3 offers and chose one of them.
Well,
I'm going to guess that they didn't spend $100,000 to $200,000 to get some architect's idea of what this might look like, and then go out for design build. I agree with you, Mark. You have to have some basic criteria, and I'm not sure how that's developed, but
a lot of the work, of course, was done, and I think the committee acknowledged this last night. A lot of the work was done by ZCS in doing the programming. I mean, they laid out the needed square feet, what the rooms would look at, the missing piece, I think, that the committee is talking about is not having a sense of how those elements would be put together in the form of a building on the site that they've now said, yes, they agree is the right site. And so they want to get a better sense of that. And I believe this all stems from a discussion that they had very early in the committee's discussions about their need or their perception that the public needed more information about what they would be voting on, and that was one of the reasons they thought it might have failed back in November. So, I guess really all I was doing was just trying to give you an update on what the committee is doing and indicate that we are going to go move forward with the RFP, which of course will come back to you to look at and decide whether it's okay.
So, but will the RFP be including for the fire station to make sure there's a piece of that's going to have some citizen participation over what the design would be, to make sure they're bringing in the historic elements to it?
Yes, we probably will need some level, even if they're going to have any kind of a meaningful rendering, they're probably going to want some public input on it. So yeah, we will include that. Okay.
I mean, that's what was communicated to the voters when we were out there for the bond, was that the citizens were going to be a part of the process of what the building was going to look like. So I would hate to see now all of a sudden going with what's the building going to look like and then not have the citizens a part of the process. So yeah.
So we can balance that.
Okay. Anything else? Okay,
a quick question. Any positive update on discussions possibly with Lebanon and the canal?
No, I met with, I think I'd reported to the council that I met with the city manager and that we're just trying to get together a follow-up meeting. I think the next step actually is Public Works is putting together a tour that would involve the Lebanon city manager, myself, and our consultant who's been working on it. It is never far from our thoughts.
Okay, staff, have anything? So, Marilyn?
Yes, early reminder to mark your calendars for Saturday, May 17th for the big pickup. We've chosen the part of the Broadway neighborhood in West Albany this year, and we will be staging at West Albany High School, the Liberty Street side parking lot where we'll have our dumpsters, and people will be dropping off their no longer wanted treasures. We will not be picking up on site. So they'll drop their junk off, junk and car debris, and we will need some greeters. Truly, we will need some greeters on site, and we will have other able-bodied people to unload.
That means loading trucks, right?
We promised you 4 years ago that we would get to this point, and then that's where we
Can we
are.
volunteer for assignments?
You may volunteer for
I
assignments.
was on dumpster duty last year. That sounds good again.
Hey, bless your heart.
Can we get rid of exotic stuff like the new modern light bulbs that we can't get rid of otherwise?
Talk to Republic Services, they take all kinds of stuff. This coincides with their annual recycle roundup, so stuff that we don't take, we send you over to Montgomery Street. They take all kinds of
They
stuff.
won't take light bulbs over there either, will they?
Somebody takes light bulbs. Talk to Habitat, they can tell you. Habitat, and then First Methodist Church keeps a long list of people who take all kinds of exotics, as you would describe them. So,
Okay,
all
all
right.
right.
Thank you, Ray.
Anything else? Okay, our
I'm sorry,
next-
Mayor, Marilyn reminded me that I have a reminder to give, and that's next Monday night is the training for land use. It's combined with the Planning Commission and Landmarks Advisory Commission, 5:30 next Monday.
5:30
It's
to,
here.
what, midnight, or?
That's up to Jim.
I had it on my calendar.
And how many
but I haven't heard
questions you
anything
have?
about it.
Advising pizza and beer or something? Or
Me? No.
Hey, 5:30 to midnight, somebody's going
I'm
to.
not intending to make you that comfortable. That lengthens the meeting.
But you know what, there is a vacancy though on the planning commission, so there's gonna be a new member coming up, so do we wanna postpone? Bessie,
I
are
think
you
we'd like to move forward because we
filling that
have
position?
I'd say
postponed it.
because I'm still waiting on information, and
Did you want did Laura give you past names from November's?
Are we thinking
or
this
not?
coming Monday?
Oh,
yeah,
she
there,
didn't?
I'd just as soon postpone. I
there was, I
had
looked back.
a large extra load dumped in my lap
Okay.
today that
Okay.
I'm going to be pressed to meet the requirements. It's dealing with the state of Oregon fight over the election violation. Now, Wes doesn't even know
Okay.
about it, but it's going to require the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to be
His
pretty engaged.
volunteer position.
Yeah.
We thought Smokey
So-
jumped in citation.
So Bessie, so you haven't gotten a list from Laura, or did you,
Well,
did she
I
need to
looked
send
back,
it to
she
her?
said that there weren't any, and I looked back, and,
I thought there was.
I didn't see any either, but I do have a lead on a
Okay.
person, so,
So
you know, it's
kind
just
of-
gonna take a while.
Maybe within a few weeks or a month, do you
Oh, yeah.
think?
Way ahead.
Okay,
Because
so maybe
the
then staff
term-
can kind of reschedule
We'll look at
in
some
past a
dates.
month from
And
now.
I apologize.
Than that.
I didn't know this was coming.
Yeah, but I think it'll work, that'll work better, because if Bessie's got a new appointment coming on, that'll be better. Okay, anything else?
Okay.
Last time. Okay, work session is for April 21st, and our regular session is April 23rd. And with that, we're adjourned.